Keir Starmer's £35 billion reality check is hitting Labour hard. He promised no new taxes for working people, but that promise is now rapidly falling apart. The Labour leader is struggling to keep his word, and it's not looking good. This public meltdown is opening up some serious cracks in the party's plans. You won't believe what's going on behind the scenes as Starmer tries to salvage his reputation. It's a political disaster unfolding before our eyes, and I have all the details for you. Remember those days a few months ago? Labour supporters were excited, believing they were in for years of prosperity and progressive policies. But how quickly things can change in politics. Fast forward to today, and it seems we're living in a very different world. Labour's poll numbers are falling. They've gone from commanding a 20-point lead to barely scraping by with a 5-point lead in just a few weeks. And the trend is showing across the board. The public's honeymoon with Labour is well and truly over. So what went wrong? How did Labour manage to squander so much goodwill so quickly? The cracks began to show almost immediately. Starmer's leadership began to sag under the weight of actually governing. His approach seemed to have changed, replaced by indecisive and vague statements. Take the economy, for example. Labour promised to make Britain the fastest growing economy in the G7. That was a central part of his campaign. But now, Starmer has quietly backed away from that pledge, talking about the coming global events and unforeseen circumstances. It's like watching his promises unfold in real time. The warning signs were there from the start for anyone who wanted to see. Starmer's attempt to appeal to everyone during the campaign left Labour without a clear direction once it came to power. Now faced with the realities of government building, the party seems stuck, unable to make tough decisions or stick to its guns. But this is only the beginning of Labour's troubles. The £35 billion bombshell that is about to fall on unsuspecting voters will make these early stumbles look insignificant in the competition. Starmer is about to learn that promises in politics have a way of coming back to haunt you. Ever wondered what £35 billion in broken promises looks like? Labour's carefully crafted image is crumbling, as rumours of a secret tax plan are making their way into the press. The question is, will voters forgive and forget? Or is this the beginning of the end for Labour's dreams of power? Labour plans to raise £35 billion in new taxes, on top of national insurance contributions. That means everyone with a job will feel the pinch. So much for the working class to look for, right? The Confederation of British Industry has warned that companies are already planning job cuts because of this tax. Labour's big plan to help working people will probably cost them their jobs. Brilliant strategy, isn't it? And who will be hit hardest? Low and middle income families. The same people are already in the throes of a life crisis. Economic projections show that these tax increases will hit them the hardest. It's like Labour is playing Robin Hood in reverse, taking from the poor to give to, well, who knows where all this money is going. People on social media are furious. And can you blame them? They voted for change, for a party that promised to back them. Instead, they're getting the same old story. Politicians say one thing to get elected, then another once in power. Starmer's government is under immense pressure to explain these tax increases. But so far, all we've heard is cricket. No clear justification. No economic argument that makes sense. Just silence from a party that promised to be different. How will voters respond to this betrayal? Will they swallow the bitter pill and give Labour another chance? Or is this the moment when the scales finally fall from their eyes? One thing is for sure, Starmer has a lot of explaining to do and a lot to do. As accusations of lying mount, Labour is finding out the hard way that it promised to do so. People remember your words, and they'll hold you to them. Starmer is about to get a crash course in damage control, but will it be enough to save his reputation? Or is this the end of Labour's time in power? This political roller coaster is far from over. Starmer has gone and redefined what it means to be a working person. And that's all the talking about. This is not the Labour Party we knew. They were all fighting for workers' rights, fair wages and social justice. But now, Starmer is trying to change the rules. In a recent speech, he said his government wanted to take care of the big questions so that working people had the freedom to enjoy the things they love. Sounds good, doesn't it? But what does it really mean? It's so vague that it could mean anything, or nothing at all. This is not a slip of the tongue. It's a calculated move to broaden Labour's appeal. But here's the thing. By trying to appeal to everyone, they can appeal to no one. Traditional Labour voters are feeling left out, wondering if there's still a place for them in Starmer's new vision. And the unions, they're not happy. Sharon Graham of Unite is calling Starmer out, wondering if Labour still represents its core base. Can you blame him? When the party that was supposed to fight for workers starts to change who those workers are, it raises some eyebrows. Even longtime Labour supporters are scratching their heads. They're watching a party that used to stand up for the little guy suddenly try to cater to a much wider crowd. It's like watching your favorite local pub transform into a trendy wine bar overnight. So is Labour abandoning its core supporters? It certainly seems that way. By trying to redefine working people to include almost everyone, they're watering down their message. What used to be a strong, clear voice for the working class is turning into a wishful attempt to please everyone. And that is causing serious divisions within the party. Some Labour MPs want to stick to their working class roots, while others are for this new, broader appeal. It is like watching a family argument over Christmas dinner. Awkward, tense and likely to end in tears. Starmer's balancing act is looking shakier than ever. He is trying to keep the traditional Labour base happy while also catering to a wider audience. But as the old saying goes, you can't please all the people all the time. So what's next for Labour? Will Starmer's gamble pay off? Or is he pushing the party off a cliff? One thing is certain, the road ahead looks rockier than ever. And with the budget backlash looming, Starmer will need all the support he can get. But will anyone still listen? Labour's first budget is here. And it's safe to say it's not winning many fans. It's been met with a fierce backlash, with criticism coming from all sides. Let's consider why this budget is causing such a stir. Tax increases are now a reality, affecting both individuals and businesses. The Confederation of British Industry is raising red flags about potential job losses due to higher national insurance contributions. It's a tough pill to swallow for companies already struggling. But here's the real kicker. The Office for Budget Responsibility says the budget will not boost economic growth at all. It's a far cry from Labour's big promises about economic recovery. Business leaders and economists are warning that these tax increases could seriously damage our economic recovery. The markets aren't happy either. We've seen some worrying ups and downs since the budget was announced. It's got everyone on edge, wondering what it means for their wallets. Starmer's attempts to defend these choices are not going well. He's struggling to explain why breaking his promise of no new taxes is actually a good thing. No one is buying it. Now here's where things get interesting. Rumor has it that Starmer is planning a change of course. He might abandon the promise of the fastest growing economy and focus instead on improving living standards. That's a smart move. If you can't meet your targets, change them, right? Labour MPs are getting worried. They're worried Starmer's economic strategy could cost them their seats. If things don't change soon, they'll find themselves back on the opposition benches before they know it. What do you think of this budget? Is Starmer making the right call? Or is he digging Labour into a deeper hole? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As Labour MPs fret about the political future, let's revisit those shiny campaign promises. Starmer's scoreboard doesn't look good. Labour's manifesto was full of grandiose ideas. Economic growth, clean energy, safer streets, better opportunities, and a better NHS. But we all know that promises are easier said than done. Take the economy. Labour vowed to make the UK the fastest growing country in the G7. Now, Starmer's backpedaling, bumbling about global headwinds and unforeseen circumstances. It's like watching a magic trick go awry. And what about Rachel Reeves' promise not to borrow or raise taxes anymore? It lasted about as long as an ice cream cone in July. The Treasury now says they won't need to raise taxes on the same scale. Translation: taxes are going up, just not as much as they had originally planned. Then there's the big deal. Labour has pledged not to increase VAT income tax or national insurance on working people. Or they've just announced an increase in employers' national insurance contributions. So much for protecting workers, right? Voters are not happy, I tell you. Social media is buzzing with despair. People feel despair, especially on economic growth and tax policies. Starmer's response to all this: he said he should judge the country not at Christmas but in 5 years' time. Talk about moving the goalposts. It's as if he's saying, don't look at what I'm doing now, focus on what I can do later. Even other political parties are taking out Labour. The SNP is accused of wreaking havoc on jobs and wages and destroying business confidence. So how many more promises will be shattered? It's hard to say, but one thing is clear. Starmer's attempts to rewrite history are fooling no one. People remember what was promised. And they are following through. As the demand for accountability grows, Labour faces a real crisis of credibility. Can they turn things around? Or will they continue to dig themselves deeper into this hole of broken promises? Only time will tell, but it doesn't look good for Starmer and his team right now. The political landscape is changing, and the Conservatives are making a surprise comeback. Elections in which Labour had a comfortable lead. They are changing, and not in Starmer's favour. The Tories, once thought to be fading, are back and giving Labour a real challenge. How have the Conservatives managed this transformation? They have been relentless in attacking Labour's weak points. The economy is a prime example. Labour promised growth, but instead we have seen stagnation. The Tories are calling Labour economically incompetent, and this is resonating with voters. Immigration has become another big issue. Channel crossings are at record highs, and the Conservatives are making it a central part of their criticism. They are accusing Starmer of failing to clean up the mess he claims he inherited. This narrative is catching on with voters who feel nothing has changed. The polls reflect this shift. Labour's once comfortable lead is rapidly eroding. Some polls even show the Conservatives neck and neck with Labour. It is a dramatic shift that has shaken up the political landscape. The Tories have found their voice in opposition and are hitting back effectively. Meanwhile, Labour is struggling to defend its record and articulate its vision for the country. The united front they once presented is beginning to crumble under the pressure. As the Conservatives gain ground, Labour MPs are nervous. Some are questioning the direction of their party and Starmer's leadership. The next few months will be crucial in determining whether Labour can regain its footing or whether we are witnessing the most significant political comeback in recent history. Labour's internal strife is reaching a crescendo, with new revelations exposing deep divisions within the party. The initial unity that followed his election victory has crumbled, replaced by a fierce power struggle and bitter infighting. Behind closed doors, Starmer and his inner circle are clinging to control while facing growing opposition from a growing faction of disgruntled MPs. These veteran politicians, well versed in the machinations of Westminster, are expressing deep concerns about the party's direction. There is a growing sense that we are losing touch with our base and that the leadership is not listening to the concerns of ordinary party members, admitted one Labour insider. This sentiment cuts to the core of Labour's identity crisis, highlighting a disconnect between the leadership and grassroots supporters. The situation is so volatile that rumours of a potential leadership challenge are circulating. Fed up with Starmer's behaviour, some MPs are considering tough action to force a change at the top. This level of internal discord threatens to throw the party into chaos. Starmer's response to criticism has heightened tensions. He has sought to silence dissenting voices, sidelined MPs who have spoken out and excluded them from key discussions. But these heavy-handed tactics are backfiring, forcing more members of the party to question his leadership skills. As the crisis deepens, Starmer's attempts to rally the troops with calls for unity and common purpose are failing. His critics are unconvinced and cracks in the Labour front are growing. With each desperate attempt to maintain control, Starmer's grip on power appears to be weakening. The unfolding drama leaves Labour in a precarious position. As internal disputes intensify and Starmer struggles to unite warring factions, the party's future hangs in the balance. How long can he hold out in the face of such fierce opposition from within his own ranks? Starmer's latest political move is raising eyebrows across the country. With Labour's internal disarray threatening to tear the party apart, he is changing the subject by delving into divisive cultural issues. It's a far cry from Labour's usual playbook of championing equality, diversity and inclusion. Take immigration, for example. Starmer has gone from promoting open borders to speaking out against immigration almost overnight. He has accused the previous Conservative government of running a national experiment in open borders and vowed not to repeat those mistakes. Yet he is still rejecting calls for an immigration cap, even with net migration at record levels. His stance is ambiguous, to say the least. The reaction from both sides of the political spectrum has been mixed. Labour's traditional left-wing base is accusing Starmer of betraying the party's values, while the Conservatives are calling it a bluff. Some political observers believe Starmer needs to adopt a more populist rhetoric to connect with voters. But at what cost? This new strategy is causing further chaos within Labour. There are clear signs of disagreement about Starmer's pivot, with some members feeling that Labour is straying too far from its traditional values and messaging. Starmer is trying to bridge the gaps by setting new targets for living standards and public services. But it's a risky move that could alienate core supporters. As public skepticism grows, you have to wonder how long Starmer can keep it up. His efforts to redefine Labour's identity are looking more and more desperate by the day. And with the party's economic credibility already in tatters, this cultural pivot may be too little, too late. Labour's identity crisis is not over yet. As Starmer fights his way through these culture war issues, the British public is watching. Will they buy what he's selling? Or see through this transparent attempt at distraction? What are your thoughts on Starmer's new strategy? Let me know in the comments. Labour's economic woes are hitting Britons hard, and the latest figures are revealing a grim reality. Despite promises of economic prowess, the UK is struggling to keep pace with its G7 counterparts. Let's examine the facts. The UK economy grew by just 0.1% in the third quarter. That's barely a blip on the radar. A far cry from the economic boom Labour has promised. And it's not just the numbers. Real people are feeling the impact. I spoke to Sarah, a mother of two from Manchester. She told me, I have to choose between heating and food. The story resonates across the country as families grapple with rising costs and stagnant wages. The Confederation of British Industry is raising red flags about potential job losses due to Labour's policies. They're warning that tax increases could force companies to lay off workers, a direct breach of Labour's promise to protect working people. International comparisons paint an even bleaker picture. Britain is not just failing to lead the G7. It is lagging behind. While other nations are making progress, Labour's economic policies are stumbling. Starmer's attempts to explain away this mess are not cutting it. He is ranting about global headwinds and unforeseen circumstances. But people want real answers. They are demanding to know why the prosperity they were promised has not materialized. Pressure is also mounting within Labour. There are whispers in Westminster of MPs demanding changes to the economic team. They fear that if things don't improve soon, they will be out of a job at the next election. As the situation worsens, Starmer's rhetoric has become increasingly desperate. He is trying to spin these disappointing figures as some kind of victory. But when your economic growth is practically non-existent, it is no victory. This is a crisis. Even Labour's own supporters are starting to question Starmer's leadership. I didn't vote for him, one Labour voter told me. Where is the prosperity we were promised? So what's next for Labour's economic strategy? Will Starmer admit that his policies are not working? Or will he keep pushing forward in the hope of some miraculous turnaround? One thing is certain, the British people are watching, and they're not impressed by what they're seeing. Labour's immigration woes are deepening, and Starmer is facing a real challenge. The issue he once attacked his opponents on has become his own weak point, leaving Labour MPs in a state of panic. Channel crossings are at record highs under Labour, and public patience is running out. Polls show growing concern about the rising numbers of migrants, and calls for tighter controls are growing louder. Starmer's response: he is trying to tread a narrow path. He has dismissed calls for an immigration cap as arbitrary. Instead, he has promised a blueprint to reduce migration immediately. But we are still waiting, and public frustration is growing. Labour leaders talk big about international cooperation and improving border security, but the lack of concrete action is clear. The party is struggling to find its footing on the issue, torn between appeasing its liberal base and allaying voters' concerns. As the government falters, questions are mounting. How long can Labour hold it together? Will Starmer finally make a definitive stand, or will he continue to hedge his bets? One thing is clear: the patience of the British public is running out, and Labour needs to act quickly if it is to avoid a major backlash at the polls. While Starmer is struggling with immigration, Labour is facing another crisis, a major confidence deficit. The latest polls paint a grim picture for the party, with confidence levels plummeting. It's a far cry from Starmer's early days when he promised honesty and competence. Let's look at the track record. Starmer promised no new taxes for working people, then gave them a £35 billion tax increase. He said he would make Britain the fastest growing economy in the G7, but now he's backtracking on that promise. Voters are watching, and they're not happy. I spoke to John from Birmingham, a lifelong Labour supporter. He told me, "I have been betrayed. I voted for change, not the same old broken promises." That sentiment resonates across the country. People are fed up with what politicians say and do. Asked about these issues, Starmer said, "I will be judged not at Christmas but in 5 years' time by how the country feels." It's like telling your boss not to judge your work until your retirement party. People are seeing right through it. Behind the scenes, Labour is in turmoil, planning a big reset speech to make its priorities clear. But let's be real, it will take more than fancy words to win back the people's trust. They're trying to rebrand to find a message that sticks, but you can't rebrand your way out of broken promises. As Labour's reputation suffers after a hit, you have to wonder what will happen next. How low can their approval ratings fall before they give anything away? Starmer has a mountain to climb if he wants to turn it around. And from where I'm standing, he hasn't even put his boots on yet. Remember when I said Starmer couldn't dig himself a deep hole? Well, he just went and proved me wrong. During a press conference about Labour's new economic plan, Starmer completely lost it. We're talking red-faced, screaming, the whole 9 yards. It all started when a reporter asked about Labour's stance on immigration. Starmer's face changed instantly, and he erupted in fury about the Conservative government's one-country experiment in open borders. He was accusing the Tories of deliberately failing on immigration, practically foaming at the mouth. Now, Starmer has been under massive pressure lately. Labour's poll numbers are terrible, his own party is turning against him, and he can't seem to get the brakes on any policy front. The fury was like a pressure cooker finally blowing its lid off. The backlash was swift and brutal. Tory MPs were loving it. Starmer had finally shown his true colours, one of them told me. He can't handle the pressure of leadership. Even Labour MPs were shocked. "This is not the Kerr we know," said an anonymous source. "He's always been very controlling. It's upsetting to see him lose like this. The media is having a field day with him. Every news channel is playing the clip over and over again. And social media is bursting with memes and hot takes. Starmer's team is trying to spin this as he's showing passion for the issues, but no one is buying it. The big question now is whether this will be the last straw for Starmer's leadership. There are already whispers of potential challenges waiting in the wings. And with Labour's reputation on the line, you have to wonder, how long can Starmer hold on? As we watch this political drama unfold, one thing is certain. Labour's future looks more uncertain than ever. And Starmer, he might as well start polishing his CV because he might need it sooner rather than later. The fallout from Starmer's meltdown has turned into a full-blown crisis for the Labour Party. MPs are scrambling for cover as shockwaves continue to reverberate through Westminster. Labour's position in the polls is falling rapidly, with some showing support for the party at its lowest level since Starmer took office. Signs of the party's disarray are everywhere. Labour MPs can't seem to agree on anything these days. Some are desperately trying to defend Starmer, while others are increasingly distancing themselves. It's a mess, plain and simple. But this is where it gets really interesting. There are whispers in the corridors of power about potential leadership challenges. Some Labour MPs believe Starmer's time is up, and they are already putting themselves forward as a replacement. Calls for Starmer to resign are growing louder by the day. And it's not just from the usual suspects. Even some of his former allies are starting to question his fitness to lead the party. There's a growing sense, a Labour insider told me, that we're losing touch with our base and that the leadership isn't listening to the concerns of ordinary party members. That's a pretty dangerous indictment if you ask me. As Labour tries to pick up the pieces, you have to wonder, can Starmer somehow turn things around? Or is this the beginning of the end for his leadership? One thing is clear, however. Labour's future looks more uncertain than ever. And with the next election on the horizon, they will have to get their act together quickly. Or they could find themselves in the cold for another 5 years. British politics is in a state of flux. We have a government in disarray, an opposition struggling to find its footing, and public confidence in the entire system has eroded. Starmer's leadership faces serious challenges, and the future of British politics looks bleaker than ever. Can Labour pull itself out of this mess? Will Starmer last the 5 years he is being asked to decide? These are the questions on everyone's minds right now. The once great party is at a crossroads, and its fate hangs in the balance. What do you think? Is there a way back for Labour? Or are we witnessing a major shift in the British political landscape? Let me know what you think in the comments. Your thoughts on this are just as important as mine, so don't hold back.